Welcome to this live stream. It's cool to see you on Keenan Music. Steven Chestnut, right on. I'm so glad you're here. And Dave and Jack. We're going to geek out about something very cool, which is the blues scale. And not only just the theory of the blues scale, but how it's applied in some really cool examples. So as always, if you're part of the replay crew, let me know where you're coming from. And we'll get into some of the chat after I go through some of these main points about the blues scale. So the blues scale is really common. Last week we talked about pentatonic scales, and the blues scale came up, and it's a good pentatonic scale is a good lead-in to the blues scale. So we're just going to play the blues scale first, so you can hear it. So let's say you've got the key of E. So we've got in the key of E, we've got E, and then G, A, B flat, B, D, and E, or scale degrees 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, and 1. And it sounds very similar to the minor pentatonic scale. We're basically just adding that flat 5. So it's very similar. Let me show you what that means. It's one thing to hear it, it's another thing to see it, and the combination of those two perspectives helps in solidifying it. But let's go to this diagram, and we've got the two main pentatonic scales that we talked about last time, which are the major pentatonic. In this example, I just did the key of E as an example. The cool thing is the same pattern applies to all 12 keys. In this case, it's the C major pentatonic right here. And the C major pentatonic, as we talked about last time, is compatible with, or basically a subset of, the Ionian, Lydian, and Mixolydian modes, which are the major modes. And then the minor pentatonic, in this case C minor, is compatible with the minor modes, Dorian, Phrygian, and Aeolian. And the cool thing is this minor pentatonic sounds really good. Actually, both the major and minor pentatonic scales sound awesome. The minor pentatonic scale is especially nice, and it's partly because it kind of lends itself to this blues scale that we're going to look at today. So just as a recap of something we looked at last time, but also just of this principle, that when I say these two patterns at the bottom of both of these columns here are both the major and minor pentatonic scales. Major pentatonic scale in this example, C, C, D, E, G, A, C. This pattern right here, C, G, D, E, C, D, E, G, A, C, is a subset or compatible with these modes. And then the C minor pentatonic scale of C, E flat, F, G, B flat, and C, or that is a subset of these three minor modes. So we're going to zoom in on the minor pentatonic, and we are looking at scale degrees 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, and 8. And a lot of times it goes well with the Aeolian. The Aeolian is the most common, along with the Dorian, the two most common minor modes. And this minor pentatonic scale is really compatible with those. Well, to make a blues scale, all we have to do is add this flat 5, which we'll do right here. So blues is we just added a flat 5. So we still got 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, and 8. And it sounds like this. Whoops, sorry. Okay, so this flat 5, this chromatic movement of just half steps right here, adds this really satisfying kind of like bluesy sound. And they call it bluesy because we talked about the minor modes being kind of more relatively melancholy. They're not as like uplifting because of the interval patterns, and so they sound a little more sad. And the blues, when you got the blues, you sound a little more sad. So the blues scale is compatible with the sadder sounding modes, not by coincidence, but because It's all kind of the vibe of not so happy, right? So that's and the color blue isn't what we're talking about here in terms of the actual shade of blue. What we really care about is the feeling of the blues and why it's often associated with these modes, because it's derived from the minor pentatonic scale, which itself is a subset of the minor modes. Okay, so the blues scale is awesome. It sounds amazing. Let's jump to this shot here. So we've got we're going to do C. So it's 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, and 8. And there's something about adding this kind of this chromatic movement that sounds so much more interesting than just the minor pentatonic. So the minor pentatonic is so that bluesy flat 5. Now, part of the reason that it sounds cool too is that that flat 5 is the tritone of the tonic. So it adds more dissonance, hence kind of more of the blues. If you're feeling dissonant, you're feeling blue. This could be, we could talk about the psychology of music and just the terminology used. And the terminology reflects the different kinds of intervals and the vibe that they create sonically, okay? So I'm playing the keyboard here, but we're going to actually jump into a couple of examples. One actually on the keyboard and another with the guitar. And two good applications of the blues scale. Before we do that, I just wanted to show this kind of summary image that summarizes what we're talking about here, which is this one here is the major scale. So we have just the major scale. It's a heptatonic scale because it has 7 notes. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If we take a subset of that, if we take out the 4 and the 5, we have 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. And if we do, if we start instead of this on the 1, if we start the pattern on the 6, so it's basically, it's just, if we made this the starting point, so it's a minor third, and then a whole step, minor third, and a whole step. That's basically what the minor pentatonic scale is. Minor pentatonic is just a permutation of the major pentatonic. So we have a minor third, whole step, minor third, whole step. That's the minor pentatonic. And you can see here that the minor pentatonic and the blues scale are virtually identical. We're just looking at it in a different way. It's kind of helpful to see it in a linear format. We're also going to look at it on the fretboard and then also in this pitch space, which is just a circular formation. You can see that these two are identical, except for with the addition of the tritone, the flat 5, which is the polar opposite of the tonic. In this case, key of C. C's tritone is the flat 5 G flat. Okay, so let's just hear it again. Okay, sounds awesome, but how is it used in music? Let's look at a couple of examples. And the first one is one of the coolest riffs ever in a Beatles song called Hey Bulldog, if you know this song. It is so good. And actually, I remember hearing that Dave Grohl from Nirvana, this was like his favorite Beatles song. And I think it's partly because of that really cool blues riff at the start. So they play the riff in on different instruments. One of the prominent instruments is a keyboard, so I'm just going to play it here. So it's in the key of B. So if we have the B blues scale, we have 1 and then flat 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, and 1. Whoops. Okay, so the riff is basically just hitting on this tonic many times to reinforce it as the tonic, and it's rising up at least to the 5th. It never gets to the flat 7, but it's, oh, sorry, let me try that again. So it's, and they do that a few times at the start, and then it's they play that, and then they get back into the. And I mean, frankly, in my opinion, that's the most satisfying part of the song. And it's that tritone, it's that blues riff. And really they're emphasizing, John Lennon wrote this song. They are emphasizing that the 4, flat 5, and 5 much of the time. They're also throwing in that minor third, which gives it that bluesy feel. But as much of the blues feel is that just emphasizing that 4, flat 5, and 5, and then 5, flat 5, and 4, just going up and down. And it is really satisfying, like I say. That song is kind of more of a, like, it's just hitting the nail on the head in terms of the use of the blues scale. Leave it to the Beatles to take like this amazing pattern and then just find out how to like just hone in on the perfect representation of or application of that pattern. So that's a really good example of the blues scale in use in a song and making that song as amazing as it is. But an unusual example of the blues scale and a really cool application is one of the first riffs I learned actually when I got a bass guitar. It was using the blues scale, but in kind of a hidden way. Like you don't necessarily, it's an indirect reference to the blues scale, where we have the blues. I'm using the key of C here. The actual song is in the key of E, but just using the table we've been looking at, we have the blues scale of 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, 8. That's the blues scale. But then it throws in this 7, which is an interesting. So basically we have 2 chromatic little sequences here. So what that looks like, we'll look at it on the keyboard and then we'll play the song on the guitar, is right here. Okay, so let's just play it in the key of C as we've been looking at it. So we have C, so 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, 7, 8. So we've got sorry. So those 2 sequences of it's 8, 7, flat 7, and then 5, flat 5, and 4. And so when I first heard this song, Come As You Are by Nirvana, it's got this really cool riff, and I didn't know, like, it sounds bluesy, but it's playing mostly on that flat 7, 7, 8 instead of the traditional 4, flat 5, and 5. So it's sorry. So it's doing the flat 7, 7, and then 1, flat 3, 1. So it's playing on the 1, flat 3, and 1 down to the flat 7 and up to the 4. So we're going to look at this chord progression and why the blues scale fits with it specifically. But it's interesting because instead of like the Beatles did with Hey Bulldog, where it's an emphasis on that the 4, the flat 5, and the 5, this has a bluesy sound. Like if you played that scale all the way through, it would be so it's basically the blues scale, but with a flat 7, 7, 8 ascending pattern. And so it's that's why it sounds bluesy, but it's not the blues scale. So it's like hard to pin down. So if we look at the chord progression, this is Nirvana, if you don't know. And this is Dave Grohl, who loves Hey Bulldog. Actually, all of them were fans. Kurt Cobain was a big fan of the Beatles. I'm not saying that the Beatles were like this direct influence on Come As You Are, but I can see how a song like Hey Bulldog with such a prominent blues riff could seep its way into Kurt Cobain's mind, coming out as something like Come As You Are with that really cool bluesy type riff, but not an obvious riff, because Kurt Cobain was interesting in how he applied these ideas. So Come As You Are is interesting because it is using some unusual chords. So it's in the key of E, Aeolian. So it's a minor 1 to a flat 7. So we're just going back and forth between E minor to a D. Come as you are, as you are, as I want you to be. Oh, down, down. Okay, so that's the first part. And the reason that the blues scale fits with that is because, let's go to this. We're in the key of E, but E minor. So we're going to rotate over here to E minor, where we have a minor 1, E minor, and a flat 7. So we're going back and forth between E minor and D. And then we get into the interlude section, which is, let me get to that. You get to the interlude section, which is a major 1, so over here, and then the flat major 3. So it's So it's playing with that. Instead of a minor 1, he's going to a major 1, but still maintaining that that kind of melancholy vibe of the minor key of Aeolian. So keeping that flat major 3, and then the bridge section is. And I swear that I don't have a gun. No, I don't have a gun. No, I don't have a gun. So it's going from A, so a major 4 to a C, a flat major 6. So he's pulling from Dorian and pulling a major 4, but then going to that flat major 6. So he's basically still kind of centering around this Aeolian minor sad sounding mode, but pulling the major 4 to the flat major 6. So it's mostly 1 and flat major 7 with a borrowed 1 to a flat major 3, and then a borrowed major 4 to a flat major 6. So he's got this. Oh, I'm showing the wrong diagram. Sorry. I'm like showing this diagram and talking about this diagram is what I mean to show. Pardon me. So in the circle of fifths, he's in the Aeolian mode with the minor 1, and he's going back and forth between minor 1 and flat major 7. He's borrowing this major 1 from over here, but still anchoring himself in Aeolian by going to the flat major 3 in the bridge between 1 and flat 3. And then that's in the interlude. And then in the bridge, he has the major 4, A to the flat major 6, C, A to C. So even though A is borrowed, he's pulling in that flat major 6, which is still part of Aeolian. Aeolian, as we looked at before, is part of that sad grouping of modes, for just a fat thumb, the terminology there. They're not necessarily sad, but they're nuanced, and they have all sorts of kind of melancholy vibes. And the blues scale is perfect for that. Now, because all of the sections are, some of the sections, including the interlude from 1 to flat major 3, and the bridge from 4 to flat major 6, because we're borrowing chords from outside of the mode in those two sections, that's when the blues riff stops. So Chris Novoselic is not playing that riff during those sections, but when it comes back to the verse, where it's just the minor 1 to the flat major 7, minor 1 to the flat major 7, when it's purely in Aeolian between E minor and D, that's when the riff goes back to. So that blues riff, which is indirectly the blues scale because it's really doing the chromatic rise from flat 7 to 7 to 1, but it's still pulling in that flat 3. It's an indirect reference to the blues scale only during the sections that are purely Aeolian, which is super compatible with the blues scale. And then he's branching out, he meaning Kurt Cobain, who wrote the song, is branching out into the other borrowed chords from different modes to kind of create that unsettling sense of they're all major chords, you know, from E major to G. And then he has an E suspended to G. In the, or from A to C. A to C, they're all major chords. So from E to G and A to C, but they have kind of an unsettling, almost melancholy sound to them because E to G is a minor third. The roots form part of that square of minor thirds, and then A to C is part of that square of minor thirds. And so it's kind of interesting. He's playing with the idea that these are major chords, so they should sound, you know, in theory, more stable, strong, and more resolute than, say, maybe a minor chord. But because the movement between those major chords, the roots are at a minor third, it has that kind of unsettling vibe, which is echoed by the lyrics, "Come as you are," you know, doused in mud, soaked in bleach. Like, it's all these contradictory phrases that are kind of like throwing you off. Like, "Come as you are," you know, "take your time, don't be late." So there's kind of that, the lyrics are echoing the chords, and the chords are reinforced by the solo. And the solo is this unusual reference to the blues scale, or an indirect hint at the blues scale, without emphasizing the obvious intervals of a 4, flat 5, and 5. It's pretty nerdy, admittedly. And I know there are a lot of self-appointed spokespeople for Kurt Cobain these days, where, you know, they're like, I am the appointed person for Kurt, since he can't speak for himself. And they'll say, oh, he had no idea what he was doing. And I think it's true. He did have a very instinctive sense of music theory. It wasn't like this conscious, like, oh, I'm going to use this to reference the blues scale and use these borrowed chords and all that. I get that. But it was based on, like I say, instinct. It was an instinctive understanding of these patterns, if not an explicit, articulated understanding of the terminology. The blues scale, I think, you know, a lot of times it's used as a solo, and it's not baked into a song, like these two examples that we looked at here with the Beatles kind of baking it into their riff of Hey Bulldog, and with Nirvana baking it into Come As You Are as like the memorable part of that song. The thing that I liked about that pattern too, when I first got my bass, in fact, I remember the first jam session I ever did, I bought a bass, had no idea what I was doing. And a friend of mine who I had just met was like, hey, you bought a bass? Good enough, let's play. And so, you know, we played that because it was so easy to play. And it's so easy because you're just playing this kind of square pattern of, you know, 2 frets across 2 strings. And so it was a lot of fun to play. And I remember thinking, man, there's something to, you know, there's something to this pattern. What's going on? My fingers are just moving 2 frets. It's back and forth. These 2 frets from a higher string to a lower string, and then these 2 frets from a low string to a high string. What's the relationship? And to be able to see the relationship, that, you know, the different intervals that are part of the matrix of notes on the fretboard, is like, oh, you can actually see what's going on rather than just counting frets or just blindly memorizing muscle movement. Muscle memory is beautiful, but if your muscles are the only thing that understand and not your mind, you know, it's wonderful to embrace your full humanity and the full capacity to see the patterns and understand the music theory. I think if Kurt Cobain did understand music theory more explicitly, he could come up with who even knows, because like what he came up with was amazing. So that is the blues scale. I'm going to jump into some of these comments here and get up to speed. Hey, John, it's cool to see you on. And yes, hopefully this is making some sense with the blues scale. And I'm interested to know too, these are just two examples that I'm bringing up with, the Beatles and Nirvana, but if there are any other great examples of an applications of the blues scale, I'd love to discover those and explore those. Leonard Chibi said, ready to geek out, psyched. I was just thinking about the blue scale. Very cool. Blue scale is like imbued into, it's like soaked into, I think, all of our bones as such a beautiful pattern. And to know the basis of the pattern is really helpful. And of course, I'm just using a couple of examples. Actually, I've used 3 examples: the key of C, just in the diagrams, the key of E in the case of Nirvana, Come As You Are, and the key of B in Hey Bulldog. But all 12 keys, have a blues scale. And I just before this, I was creating some diagrams, kind of playing around with, because it's helpful to see it on a keyboard, like to see just the linear format, but then it's also helpful to see it on the guitar. And so I've been playing with some diagrams that will go with this that are, the blues scale for each key on both the keyboard right above the fretboard and the fretboard, which I think help solidify the pattern and you can put theory into practice. So I'll be posting that sooner than later, now that I've kind of figured out the layout. Jack Delaney, I love the Beatles tune too. In Hey Bulldog, is Hey Bulldog in, does that show up in Yellow Submarine cartoon? I can't remember. So right around that time, and it's one of their best songs. I kind of feel like it's a hidden gem. I know Dave Grohl loves that song, but I don't know how known it is, but it should be more known, I think. Jeff, in the minor pentatonic, why is the minor 7th used instead of the flatted 6th? All right, let's look at that. Let me pull this up. I'm going to go back. I'm just pulling up this diagram, then I'll show it. I'll show that in a sec. I have an example of what I was showing or talking about with the layout of those diagrams. So let's look at the blues scale right here. It's still kind of marked up, but okay. So Jeff, you said in the minor pentatonic scale, sorry, that's the blues scale. Let's go to the minor pentatonic. Minor pentatonic. Why is the minor 7th used instead of the flatted 6th? So why is this used instead of this? So let's play both. We're going to play just the minor pentatonic scale as is. So it's... Okay, and if we played a flat 6 instead of a flat 7, that actually sounds really cool. The reason that this is used, and I see what you're saying, because like in these 2 modes, for example, in Phrygian and Aeolian, both has a flat 6, but that flat 7 shows up in all of the minor modes. So that's partly the reason. Also because because of that permutation, that just like how the heptatonic scales, or major scale Ionian and minor scale Aeolian are permutations of one another, the major and minor pentatonic scales are permutations of one another. So for example, if we went to this and we played C major pentatonic, okay, let's play C major. Okay, and just those are all the white keys, right? From one octave to the next. If we play a permutation of that, where we're going to go from A to A, all the white keys, it's... Okay, so A minor and C major are permutations of one another. in the same way, if we do the major pentatonic starting on the C, so 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8. If we do that same grouping of notes, but instead start on A, it's 1, flat 3, 4. So it's 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, and back to 1. So that flat 7 shows up rather than the flat 6. That's a good question, and the pattern that you just spelled out though does sound awesome with the flat 6 instead of the flat 7. It's just not called the minor pentatonic in that case. T. James, Hey Bulldog is my favorite Beatles jam. That's awesome. Yeah, I remember playing that song for my nephew back in the day. It was like the first time he had heard it, and he was like 18 months old, and he freaked out and we probably listened to it 25 times back to back. He was just like, so it's interesting to see how primal it is for someone that young who's never even heard of it, is just like, this is amazing. And he listened to it, and therefore I listened to it dozens of times. It was awesome. Let's see. One, the inspiration for Come As You Are was a Killing Joke song. Interesting. So do you know the name of the song? That would be cool to hear. And how, like, what that sounds like, and if there is like kind of a bluesy riff to it, that would be interesting to hear. All right, cool. So Keeney Music, speaking to Jeff's comment there, I love it. Yeah, the patterns are super interesting, and that's, music is all about patterns. Let's see. So so basically anything goes. Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, when you get down to it, there's the art of the science. Art and science are flip sides of the same coin. So just as, Picasso said, you have to know the rules in order to break them. He definitely broke the rules. Picasso is like the perfect example, and it's such a great quote. But the key being that is he knew the rules in order to break them. So it doesn't just look like chaos. That's what distinguishes music from noise. Noise is chaos. Music is ordered sound. And so if you know how sound is ordered, you can play with expectations, just like Nirvana did with Come As You Are. There's that kind of that expectation that it's going to be the 4, flat 5, and 5, but to have it be the flat 7, 7, and 8 as that chromatic riff is really interesting. And so anything can go, but a lot of stuff people don't want to take back in terms of the anything goes, unless there's some kind of logic to it or some kind of meaning to the structure. King Music said, reminds me of part of the score music from Finding Nemo a little bit. Interesting. Was that from what was playing at that time? Maybe the Hey Bulldog. I'm guessing it's maybe the Hey Bulldog more than Nirvana with the consonants of a Pixar film. Okay, so any of the Kings, yeah, well, I guess I don't know, would be a good start. Oh, interesting. So I would need to hear some of their stuff to know what it sounds like. Okay, what's the difference between the use of the blues scale between the Kings? I guess I don't know what you mean. How do you mean? Just so I can speak to it knowledgeably. Because the blues scale you can go different ways, and there are variations on all these patterns. So we're talking about a handful of scales here, including like the major pentatonic, the minor pentatonic, which are subsets of the major scales and all of the different modes. And then now we're starting to talk about the blues scale, but we're still like within a very small subset of the universe of scales. And so we're going to be getting into more scales. And of course, because chords are derived from scales, that opens up all sorts of possibilities in terms of chords. Because chord progressions are derived from chords, that opens up possibilities for all sorts of songs. So everything is tied together, all of these subsets of subsets and connected relationships between patterns. So definitely going to be getting into some more of those, but want to start with some beloved scales like the major scale, like the pentatonic scales, and like the blues scale. Let's see. So, okay, cool. Linder Tube. So Juan Camilo, I think The Damned Life Goes On track with that riff came before Killing Joke, 80s. Both came before Nirvana. That's super interesting. I'm going to have to hear those to hear the influence. That reminds me of one that I want to talk about, just musical inspiration and where it comes from, and sometimes some very unexpected sources of inspiration. There's a really classic song that actually went through multiple. It's almost like a game of telephone or whatever, where it's like you tell someone something and then they tell someone else, and by the time it gets to the end of the line, it's morphed in quite a way. There's a really good example of a song that does that we'll get into. But with the example you're giving here, Linder Tube, I want to hear those to know, because I can't hear it I can't hear it in my head. So I definitely want to check that out. I love Many Vibes, the notes. You're a good note taker with these. I love it. Key Music, you said, sound is ordered, 1 sine wave burger, please, and add some pentatonic sauce on the side. I like that pentatonic is trademarked with the K. That's awesome. If that's not trademarked, you should snatch that up as soon as you can. I love it. So yeah, that's the blues scale with some examples. I'm gonna have these diagrams. Actually, the song Insight for Come As You Are, I'm gonna have all of those diagrams that I'll add in the post, and then also these. So this is what I was talking about with the different patterns. Like it's helpful to see. This is the blues scale as Nirvana uses it in Come As You Are, but this is just the plain blues scale, right? So you've got, and I guess it would be helpful if I mark each tonic, thinking out loud here, like all of the E's, so you kind of know where the tonic is, where to anchor yourself, the tonal home base. So that's the E. And then moving between these E's in different ways, you have just moving, you can move all around the fretboard. It's like a dance board. You can dance from one octave to the next, following these patterns. And then just seeing it with the keyboard, I think, is helpful just as a linear format. But again, it's just that 4 flat 5 5, which is common. But what Nirvana did is they have that 4 flat 5 5, and then also the flat 7 7 8 for that really nice kind of 2 steps of chromatic scales or chromatic scale patterns. And the reason that 7 leads so well to the 8 is because it is part of a major scale. This is called a leading tone right below the octave because it leads to the octave. The leading tone leads to the octave. The leading tone leads to the octave. It doesn't matter where you are in the pattern. That leading tone wants to lead back to the tonic, from this tonic to that tonic, and that leading tone sounds really nice. And then, of course, the tritone right there, this pattern, this relationship pattern. We'll get into that more because there's cool stuff with tritones and their significance with the fretboard and with all of music, as we saw with John Coltrane. So that is the blues scale. I didn't have more to speak of, but I will be posting these diagrams so that you can jump in not only in this key, in this case the key of E, but in any key you want, so you can play with this pattern on the fretboard and maybe come up with a cool riff of your own based on these patterns. Yeah, thank you for being on this one. This was fun to geek out with you on the blues scale, and we're gonna have a good one next week as we're getting into the Halloween season. So have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk very soon. We'll see you. Bye.